I've been waiting for the 60s to come back since January 1st, 1970, and I knew it. I knew that that time would never come again. I came of age during the 60s. I was a child when Kennedy was killed, and remember that as the turning point in my life as it was for the nation. The Vietnam War politicized me. I demonstrated in high school and engaged in sit-ins in college, and worked for McCarthy and rooted for the civil rights movement to take seed the way it did. So all of the battles of the 60s were the battles that forged my identity. I think in many ways the 60s were the decade where America itself came of age, had a kind of adolescence. It was the moment that the country turned to its young for its lifeblood, and it's been telling the story of its young ever since. We take our characters through the most dramatic and iconic events of the decade. So we do go from the early civil rights movements, the freedom marches, the voter registration drives, the sit-ins, the lunch counter sit-ins, through the early Vietnam protests against the war, the very beginning of the anti-war student movement, through the March on Washington, the Chicago Convention police riot, the Columbia strikes, the first student sit-in. We go to Woodstock. We see Dylan go electric at the Newport Folk Festival. Well, the whole gene of the idea was to find families that were emblematic of all families in America and find ways of putting their various family members through the traumas that the whole country went through. Naturally, we tried to take our characters to the big events in the way that we, the participants of those events, traveled from demonstration to demonstration, to be present at those historic moments. I wanted to do television as soon as the idea of the 60s became possible, because it's a medium in which the 60s should be explored. We experienced the 60s watching television. We all experienced the death of Kennedy around our televisions together, the death of Martin Luther King around our television sets together. I watched the Chicago Convention in my living room with my parents, weeping that I wasn't there. So television is, in some sense, almost part of the 60s. The Nixon-Kennedy debate, the first television debate, where television made our first media president. So it was the perfect medium for the 60s, and I'm such a nut for the 60s. Everything that I believe in was forged in the 60s. Everything that's come to be important to me, I think, was seeded in the 60s. So the idea of getting to do an epic, essentially, was thrilling to me. This was the decade in which rock and roll came to its full glory, and it's the decade in which music was the expression of our soul. Music was the text of the 60s. We ran to the record store the first weekend every Beatles album came out. The first weekend every Dylan album came out. It was signature of the moment. It's how we passed the time. It was our poetry. And so it's very much, I think, also the art that emerged from the 60s was the music. So in putting the show together, securing the music rights was one of the most important jobs that we had. We had wonderful cooperation from all of the managers and the acts and the labels, because everyone loves those times as we do. Musically, we will hear from everyone from James Brown to the Beatles, to Lovin' Spoonful and Buffalo Springfield, from the Doors to Bob Dylan, lots and lots of Bob Dylan. I don't think there's been anything like this on television before in lots of ways. For one thing, there's never been a tie-in between a network show and a record album before, where music is so much an essential part of a television event. Second of all, the combination of documentary and narrative that the show tries to be. The idea that you're covering American history at the same time as you're getting to watch love stories and families coming apart and coming together is itself a technique that we sort of studied from ragtime, and we've studied from various novellic forms. It's Dickensian, but it hasn't been used in television. And television is a thrilling medium for documentary. So there's a way in which the various stocks that we're using, when we use documentary footage, when we use film footage, and when we use news footage, we're combining all kinds of stock that at the same time as we shoot our scenes, we're also shooting. So we're shooting our own archival footage to match the archival footage that we're going to use, the real historical news event. We're shooting black and white news footage as we use the NBC News footage. There are going to be so many different kinds of film stocks in the show, you're never going to know where you are. We wanted to tell a story about young people because it was the young people's decade. We didn't want to tell the grown-up story. We didn't want to tell my parents' story. We wanted to tell the generation, the boomer generation story, and we were 13 to 20 when this stuff was all happening. So we wanted to hire the best talent, the breaking talent of the younger generation, which is unusual in network television that often relies on known commodities. We do have a couple of extraordinary known commodities too, but the fun thing about the casting in this show is it was for no reason but for quality and perfection of caricature only. Well, I'm thrilled to say that my first television project has as good a crew working for it as any huge feature that I've ever worked on. It's one of the best crews I've ever worked with, and the show has not been, I must say, for all of its get up and go, fast locations, the crew's been up to it, and we're getting a look that I strive for in features, and I'm thrilled to be able to support my director in accomplishing that. That is the triumph of Mark Pisnarski, the director of the show, who's going to give a look and a style to the show that will be, as I think, as distinguished as its theme. I think the great thrill about this, and I think the reason it's my favorite thing that I've done, is because you can reach so many people through popular entertainment with ideas that once seemed very radical and now feel very open-hearted and unthreatening. There are heroes to be announced in this show that haven't been the classic heroes of American history, and I'm thrilled and proud to be able to excavate those people from pop cultural history and bring them to our children's generation. The idea of communicating between generations and letting our children know what we saw and what those times meant to us and how they changed us. And let our children know that you can change the world with ideas. That's an indescribably wonderful gift that I'm very grateful to be able to participate in. I hope everyone finds themselves in this show. I hope girls find their teenage selves in this show, and vets find their soldier selves in this show, and activists find their idealistic selves in this show, and yuppie bankers who were once hippies and hate remember how much fun it was once. And yet we don't want to idealize a time that was also very complicated and had really complicated implications for the culture, and we try not to do that as well. I guess I hope what we see is a reflection of us at our best, at our worst, enough to inspire and stimulate real conversation between the generations.